Soon, the world's eyes will turn to the Canadian cities of Toronto and Vancouver, showcasing the Great White North to the world. Besides showing off their poutine, maple syrup, Timbits, and ketchup chips, Canadians are hoping to flaunt a star-studded squad ready to make a deep run on home soil and prove once and for all that Canada is more than just a hockey nation. Welcome to Kickback Soccer Media's World Cup Capsules, where you'll learn everything you need to know about all 48 of the national teams competing at Canada's 2026 World Cup, from the history of the game, the nation's current World Cup trajectory, unsung heroes, and cultural moments. I, of course, am David Goss, and today we're talking about those hosts, Canada. In any World Cup, the pressure is on a host nation to perform. That pressure, though, it feels is kicked up even higher with this Canada team. It feels like the perfect moment in time. They've got a golden generation of players. They've got sky-high aspirations. They have a charismatic head coach, and they think they can achieve some World Cup glory on home turf. This is an opportunity to not only show off the country's passion for the sport, but it could establish Canada as a true global power in the sport. Leading that effort is Alphonso Davies. Fonzie is the country's most high-profile player of all time. The left back for Bayern Munich, formerly of the Vancouver Whitecaps, is known for his speed, his dribbling, his creativity off the left wing, his tenacity, the way he stays in every single play. He is an incredible example of what Canada is made of. He was born as a Liberian refugee in Ghana in a refugee camp. His family fled during the Second Liberian War, and they eventually emigrated to Canada and settled in Edmonton. Davies represents the modern Canadian success story. He was taken in by his community. He was the recipient of inner-city, low-income programs, and he has risen through the ranks to bring success to his adopted country. At 17 years old, a brace-faced Davies stood in front of the entire FIFA World Congress as a representative of this World Cup bid. He talked at the time about all the sport had given him and Canada.
Today, I am 17 years old, and I play for the men's national team, and I'm a proud Canadian citizen. And my dream is to someday compete in the World Cup.
But he's not alone. This incredible generation of players sports Jonathan David, the Juventus forward up top, who scored so many goals in France for Lille. It's tricky winger Tajon Buchanan, who's now in La Liga with Villarreal. It's silky FC Porto central midfielder Steven Eustáquio. It's Cyle Larin, who led all of the world in goal scoring on the road to the 2022 Qatar World Cup, and many, many more. Any of these players would have represented a peak moment for Canada in their history, and all of them are on the team right now at the same time. While Canada isn't considered a historical powerhouse in the sport, the game does have deep roots in the Great White North, dating all the way back to the mid-1800s. Yes, you heard that right. Outside of the British Isles, it is one of the longest organized soccer histories in the world. Canada had registered associations formed all the way back in 1876, the oldest outside of the UK, and they played a friendly in New Jersey against the USA team in 1885, which they won 1-0. It is, though, an unofficial friendly, and therefore it's not fully registered, but it is the first international match to ever occur outside of the UK. The Canadian Soccer Association was eventually created in its current form in 1912, and it joined FIFA. It later withdrew alongside England in 1926 before rejoining in 1948. Throughout the 20s and 30s, Canadian teams were playing and winning consistently against U.S. sides in North American club championships. Several Canadian teams have competed in the NASL throughout the 60s and 70s, and man, these names are great. You had the Montreal Manic. You had the Toronto Blizzard. You had the Edmonton Drillers. But best, I think, is you had the Calgary Boomers. You also had success. The Toronto Metro Croatians and the Vancouver Whitecaps each won an NASL Soccer Bowl, and the Toronto Blizzards lost 2 different finals. After the NASL folded, though, Canada tried and failed numerous times to launch a national soccer league of their own. They tried the Canadian Pro Soccer League. That lasted just one season in 1983. And then the Canadian National Soccer League in the early 90s, which only lasted 4 years. That inability to find traction was a trademark of the national team as well. Through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, Canada qualified for just one Men's World Cup back in 1986, and they failed to score a single goal. The low point may have come in 2001, when they couldn't even beat Cuba to qualify for the final round of CONCACAF qualifying. That may have been the low point, but unfortunately there is debate with that, because 10 years later, Canada suffered an 8-1 loss to Honduras in the third round of qualifying. But during that time, there was hope. The clubs in Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, two of which were part of the NASL back in the days, joined Major League Soccer, and they are some of the most engaged, energized fan bases in the league. The clubs have been some of the most professional in the league. They've attracted global superstars. They've developed young players like Alphonso Davies, and Toronto FC went on to win the treble in 2017 in Major League Soccer, the first Canadian team to win that.
In a year when they have rewritten the record books, the greatest season in MLS history is now complete as Toronto FC win their first ever MLS Cup. And the trophy will have a home north of the border for the first time.
All three clubs have been to a regional Champions League final. And then in 2019, the Canadian Premier League launched with 6 clubs, and it is still going strong today. So maybe it's in the name that one finally stuck. By 2022, the national team had found its footing as well, and they qualified in emphatic fashion for the 2022 World Cup. They were the top team in CONCACAF. They had a legendary victory at home in the snow outside in November in Edmonton against Mexico. That's known as the Eustáquio. They knocked off the U.S. as well. It was one of the strongest performances in qualifying the region has ever seen, but it was cut off quickly at the World Cup level. They were drawn into the group of death with Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco. Those are two teams that made it to a World Cup semifinal in a 4-year span, and the golden generation of Belgium. They dropped all 3 games, but they did net 2 goals. That team then spurred forward into the 2024 Copa América, hosted in the United States. The team was semi-finalists. They beat Peru 1-0 and drew Chile 0-0 in the group stage. They beat Venezuela in penalty kicks in the quarterfinals before losing to Argentina 2-0, both in the semifinal and in the group stage. They lost the third place game in PKs to Uruguay, but they were up 2-1 in the 92nd minute before Luis Suarez equalized. This, a team that had won 1 Gold Cup ever, a team that had only been to 1 World Cup all time before 2022, was in a Copa América semifinal. The breadth with which this team has jumped cannot be understated. They, of course, didn't play in qualifying because they are hosts of the 2026 World Cup. So they played a number of friendlies and are trying to gear up under their new head coach, Jesse Marsch. Marsch was hired in May of 2024 after having an interim since John Herdman had left in October of 2023. Herdman left to take over a club job, but all of this occurred in the midst of a giant scandal dealing with drones while John Herdman had been head coach of the women's national team, and then his former assistant Bev Priestman, who took over. This controversy is added to the last 3 years that have seen players strike against the federation, club complaints about treatments of players, like Bayern Munich's complaints about the way Alphonso Davies was used and then eventually injured in the Nations League, a scheduling friendly versus Iran, which had to be canceled the day of the game due to controversy about past Iranian government attacks on Canadians. It has been a mess at times off the field. But Jesse Marsch took over this talented group, he came straight into a murderer row of friendlies. His first week on the job, they went to the Netherlands, where they lost 4-0, but then they went to France, where they drew 0-0, and 1 month later, they were in that Copa América on the field in the opener against Argentina. They held their own, they won those games, they moved on, and eventually made it to the semifinals. They then played in the 2025 CONCACAF Nations League. They beat Suriname 4-0 across the two legs before losing the semifinals to Mexico in Los Angeles. But they beat the U.S. in its third place game where Jesse Marsch was kicked out against his country of origin. They created a made-up tournament called the Canadian Shield, which they won over Ivory Coast, Ukraine, and New Zealand this summer, June of 2025. After that, in an international window, they went to Europe and played a European opponent and beat them for the first time in Europe in 16 years against Romania in Bucharest 3-0. They then turned around and went to Wales and won there as well. There's a lot of great young talent coming up through Canada, but the one to watch is Ismail Kone, the 23-year-old on the books at Marseille currently, but has had a tough time and is on loan at Sassuolo. He signed with Montreal as an amateur player in 2021. He made his debut in 2022 and then was signed for $8 million by Watford by the end of that year. He then, after a year and a half, flipped that into a $12 million sale to Marseille. He is only going to continue to grow and push. He already has 35 caps in his international career. When you have a sport in a country with the lack of success for Canada, both in creating leagues and at the national team level on the men's side, there are a number of unsung heroes who have kept the flame alive for this sport in the country over the last 100 years. There are people on the administrative side. There are coaches. There are scouts. There are youth coaches. There are players. There are a lot of names you can bring up. And there is talent. Craig Forrest, who played over 300 times in the Premier League and led Canada to the 2000 Gold Cup victory, the only in the nation's history. There's Dwayne De Rosario, one of the great players in Major League Soccer history, one of the great players in CONCACAF history. But you, of course, have to talk about Atiba Hutchinson. Hutchinson experienced Canada at its lows. He played for a team that was ranked 122 in the world and 16th in CONCACAF. Then there was the high of leading his country out on the field at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar after that 36-year absence. He is the all-time caps leader for Canada with 104. He represents all of the highs and lows of Canada, but with a 20-plus year club career with eye-popping appearance numbers for both Copenhagen and Besiktas, he was the one player that you could hold up and say, this guy could play in any team against anyone at any time. And that was before Canada really believed they could create players like that. They have built and named a soccer court after him in his home neighborhood of Brampton, inside of Toronto. He is 6-time Canadian Player of the Year. He is in the all-time Canada 11 that was voted on by the Canada Soccer Association. He retired in 2023. He got the chance to go to a World Cup with his nation. He won't be at this home one, but you have to believe he will be celebrated time and again throughout the months leading up to that World Cup. Canada is not a stranger to hosting a World Cup. They did so with the 2015 Women's World Cup, where their Canadian women's national team, led by the world's all-time goal scorer, Christine Sinclair, made a deep run, but the U.S. was the one who ended up actually winning their first title since 1999. Toronto was not a host city for that, although Toronto has hosted U20 World Cups, Pan American Games. They will be hosting alongside Vancouver now, who did host the final of that 2015 Women's World Cup. Toronto will host 5 group stage games and a round of 32 match at BMO Field, which has been expanded for this tournament. It is one of the great places to watch soccer. It is right in the city. It's off the train. You can walk to the games, and it is an exposition park looking out on one of the Great Lakes with the city behind you. Anyone who goes to the World Cup in 2026 has to find a way to go to Toronto. It is one of my favorite cities in the world, and Vancouver will host 5 group stage games as well. They will have both a round of 32 and a round of 16 match, and that is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. A glass city surrounded by mountains and water. Both of these are going to be two of the best atmospheres at the World Cup. So you're going to be lucky if you end up in either of them. There are great soccer bars in both. There are great neighborhoods and districts. So they are two of the most fun cities in the world, and we highly recommend you take a trip there. And as always, we love to leave you with a fun fact and expectations for the upcoming World Cup. For this Canadian team on the field, there are high hopes, as there should be. They have gone toe-to-toe with the U.S. and Mexico inside of the region. They now have World Cup experience. There are players playing in high-stakes, high-level competitions around the world, but especially in UEFA Champions League. So this team could make a run to the round of 16. They could make a run to a quarterfinal. They have a chance to solidify this country as a soccer nation and solidify the support for the game inside of Canada. Canada is known for many things, but one that many people may not know is it is where Hawaiian pizza was invented. It was invented by a Greek immigrant, Sam Panapopoulos, when he came up with the idea in 1962 to attract customers to his Ontario restaurant. He tried many experiments, but Hawaiian pizza was the one that won. That's it for Canada. Make sure you tune into the rest of our capsules and follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.